Today is a very special episode. Yes, I am very happy and proud and excited to talk to this person today, Robert Horn, Tony winner. And if you don't know this, me and him go back a long time. So there's going to be lots to talk about, and hope you enjoy our chat. So hello, Robert. How are you?
Edward, Eddie, we go back a long time.
You know, I was just thinking today, because I knew we were going to be chatting. I was like, we could be like Sally and what's her name in Follies, Sally Duran Plummer, the other chick.
I know, except neither of us would ever live in Arizona, so so that's off the table.
We'll do a revival of Follies. I'll play Sally Phyllis, and you can play Phyllis. I think that would be fantastic.
Thanks. I don't even get the Bernadette part.
Oh, okay. So, congratulations. I mean, I've seen you afterwards, but because of the nature of this, I'll pretend I haven't. So congratulations on the Tony.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Was fabulous.
It was, it's surreal. It is, as much as you tell yourself it's not important, it doesn't matter, it matters. It's fun, and it's, it's a validation for a lifetime of commitment to something by your peers. And it is that, the next day your life goes back to what it was, and you're unemployed again. But for that moment, it's glorious and scary and all those things. But it was, and it's so interesting because you spent all those lean times with me, and we've both worked so hard to get where we are and to know what we know and learn what we've learned, and so it's never,
so what is it really, that kind of like surreal moment when you get up there and they announce your name and you stand there looking out at all those people with that award, and you're like, is this really happening? Am I dreaming this? Is that moment like bizarre?
Oh my God. Well, it's bizarre. Well, first of all, so as you know, leading up to the Tonys, it's about 5 or 6 weeks of chaos, because you've got the outer critics, the New York Drama Critics, the Drama Desk, and then the Tonys, and it's a series of events and awards and dinners and awards. And so by the time it happens, you're so stressed and worn out anyway.
Right.
Because you've been on parade for weeks. And for us, it started, we opened end of April, got our reviews, and literally the next week they started announcing the award, the nomination. So it was we had tech, and we had rehearsal and tech and previews and opening, and then so it was like a 3-4 month. Yeah. But it is sort of surreal. They tell you you have 90 seconds from the time your name is announced to the time they play you off. And so get your ass up there. So if you, yet you're sitting there, and my category was weird because sometimes they televise Best Book and sometimes they don't. They alternate between Best Book and Best Score year by year. And so we didn't really know until almost right before whether we were going to be where we were going to be. And then they told us we were going to be during the commercial at the 9 o'clock hour, right before the third commercial break. And so I was like, okay, great. And during the pre-show, which is that 1 hour before the show starts televised, they have a bunch of awards, choreography, and this, that, all the stuff that should be televised but isn't.
Yes, I know.
And suddenly at the very end of that, at like 7:58, they decided to announce our category, and we didn't know they were going to do it. So first of all, I was like, wait, oh my God, that's me. And so I was sort of, and then you sit there and they read the names and you just run through your head. You're like, I got here, I was nominated. This is the most amazing thing. It doesn't matter at this point. how humiliating to lose in front of everybody I know, but that's okay. And you just, and you don't know, and it's great. And then if you're lucky enough to hear your name, well, here's what happened, because it was the pre-show. People were like standing in the aisle right by where I was. And there was kind of like, because some people were sitting. And so I was like, okay, in case they win, I got to navigate a flight plan here. I gotta get her. And so then you're up there, and I will tell you this. There were 2 or 3 things that I remember. It is surreal, but I remember thinking my life just changed. I literally remember thinking my life just changed. And then I knew I had 3 hard jokes. I had 3 jokes I had to get out, because I'm like, jokes is jobs. Just don't. I'll thank everybody later. Just, I'm getting jokes out. And the first joke I did got a laugh. And you know me, I've never really been on stage. I'm a behind the stage guy, and you know this because you've performed. You feel the audience, when an audience, and that's 5,000 people, it is literally like it's a sensation. You get punched in the gut, and you actually can feel the energy from the audience. And I didn't expect that. And it shook me a little bit. I was like, oh, that's why people are actors. That's nice. I like that. Yep. And then I remember looking out and seeing like Brenda Peters and Sutton Foster, and seeing people, and sort of like, that's crazy. And then I remember looking around, and it was Radio City. And when we were kids, we used to spend hours and hours at Radio City. I mean, it was so surreal. And I looked around and I said, I'm on the stage at Radio City. What did I deserve? What did I do to deserve this? And all those thoughts kind of run through your mind, and then you're goodbye, you're off.
So you, now before the awards, you were people were saying that your odds were really big to win, right? That you were one of the favorites. Did you and I'm sure people were telling you that. Were you like, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to hear it? You must have gotten, because it was all over. Like, I knew, even here in the provinces, I heard that you were one of them.
Well, you know what?
You were one of the favorites to win.
I definitely felt the support of the community. I think one of the things was, because we had such an incredible director, Scott Ellis, and producers, Scott Sanders and Carol Feineman, and because I got to work with David Yazbek, who was really so generous, they let me write a book. They let me write a play. And it had been a while. First of all, a lot of adaptions, a lot of musicals from movies just put the movie on stage, and I didn't want to do that, and they allowed me to say, we want to make it our own thing. And so people really celebrated the idea that we made it its own thing, that we didn't put the movie script on stage, and that it actually had a book that they let me actually write scenes and not just get to the song. And that's David. He was very generous to let me do that. So I definitely felt the support of the community. But then what started to happen was, this is going to sound terrible, but I'll say it anyway. What started to happen was I started to win awards. So I started to we won the Outer Critics, and then I won the Drama and the Drama Desk, and once you start winning, you sort of feel like maybe there's some momentum for it, but you really don't know. I was up against some really phenomenal writers, some real craftspeople. And so it could have gone any way. It truly could have. So you hope, but yeah, I was like, don't say, people were coming up and saying, it's yours. I was like, just don't say that. Please don't say that.
People were saying it was yours to lose. Like, you were the Glenn Close of
yeah, exactly. Glenn lost. That's all I'm going to say.
Did you have your plastic face ready if you lost?
Well, because we were in the pre-show, the cameras weren't on us.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't have to worry about that.
So anyway, you made a statement We're going to go back in time a little because you made a statement that you're not an on stage, you're more off stage. That wasn't always true.
Correct.
Because that's how we met on stage, right?
Well, you were on stage. I was just basically trying to follow you wherever I could. We did. We met. We did a production of Peter Pan, and you were Captain Hook. You were Ed Fernandez as Noel Coward as Captain Hook.
No, you forgot as Charles Lawton, as Noel Coward.
Yes, as Charles Lawton, as Charles Nelson Riley, as and I was Smee.
Yeah.
And it is how we met. That is how we met and bonded. And we were both in we were young. We were, I guess, 16 or so.
I think around 16. Yeah, I was thinking my sophomore year. I don't think I was in my sophomore year of high school. So I don't know, 16. Block it all out. I don't know.
And we were both in sort of precarious living situations at the time.
Yeah.
We both were having it was not easy, and we found each other, and we bonded instantly.
Because I remember sitting there, because I had never, that was the first show I auditioned for because, that was the first show I auditioned for because I was never cast in junior high school. I was very bitter.
And nothing's changed on that front. Let's be clear.
Like very bitter. And Newtown hadn't done shows in a long time. They had just not done shows. That's the high school we met, Newtown High School in Queens.
In Queens.
I don't know if it's open anymore. I don't think they closed it. Anyway, so they announced they were going to bring back the musical, and I went to audition. I was terrified. And I sang If I Were a Rich Man, and you were behind me. I remember that. I was sitting there. I just remember that like yesterday. I was sitting there in those uncomfortable seats, and I remember you had a big mop of curly hair at that time. It was like
I had a fro. I had a big G fro.
And I just remember you were sitting behind me, and by the end of the audition, we were fast friends. Seriously.
I actually don't remember that. I don't remember that. Did I even audition? I don't know.
Yes, you auditioned. I auditioned with If I Were a Rich Man. And I forget what you auditioned with. But by the time we left that audition, we were friends. And then by the time, we did the show together, we were fast friends.
We were fast friends.
Yeah.
And then, not to necessarily go through the entire...
And the clean version, okay?
This was New York at a very different time. All I will say is, I won't go into details, but I will say, you do not know sordid lives until you know our lives. This was, and I will say,
let's save the really good stories for the memoirs.
We will, but I will say this, in our defense, this was a time in New York that was very different. Yeah. It was post Stonewall and pre-AIDS. And there was a grittiness and a celebration in the city, in our culture and for our generation. We were the first real post Stonewall generation.
It was a party.
There was our own Declaration of Independence, and it was a different time, and it was a glorious time that will or can ever be repeated.
Never.
But we were very, very young and on our own at a time when kids were still living at home, and we had no rules.
I was 18 when I moved in with you. When we gaslighted your roommate so I could move in.
I had gotten an apartment. I had gotten an apartment. I'd been living on Thompson Street.
I'm telling people this because I'm talking to a lot of people, and I'm telling people this, that our apartment between Bleecker and Houston on Thompson, $125 a month. A month. Divided by 2 people. And yet we still couldn't pay the rent.
A lot more people than that. It was really, in many ways, the renaissance of theater in New York. It was the
Mhm.
it was the 70s. This was, I mean, I had it was
You were at
Chorus Line
NYU,
was
right?
just it was like the mid to, it was like 75, 76, somewhere around there.
And you were at NYU. You were at NYU theater,
Not
right?
yet, not yet. No, that came
No,
later.
not yet. Okay.
No. And then and then we it was we were artists and we knew we wanted to be in this industry, and we didn't really know anybody or anything, but we knew we were in the nucleus of it.
Yeah.
And we had and we saw everything. We used to second act things. We used to stand in the back for $5. We would see things over and over.
Yeah. We didn't even. We because it was top ticket was $15. $15, folks, on a Saturday night.
Which we couldn't afford.
But then you got into tics, and it was $6 and $1 service charge.
And then we became and then I got a job at is now the Gershwin, but it was the Uris.
You were there, and I remember you coming home and saying, oh my God, you're working the new Sondheim show. It was a big deal because you were working at the Uris, and you were like, Eddie, this is a weirder show. It is the weird. They are killing people and eating people.
Well, I started working there when The King and I was there with Gil Brenner and Constance Towers.
Yeah.
And I remember Angela Lansbury filled in for 2 weeks for Constance Towers, and I sent her a fan letter backstage, and she left. I was working the bar then it was called the Uris Theater. When you would work those concession stands at the time, it's as different as now. If you would start the evening with 50 cups, and you had $25 at the other night, it means you sold 25 cups if the sodas were $1, and you'd have 25 left. So we used to walk around during the show and wash out cups and resell them so we could keep the money because we were so poor. I'm not proud of that.
But you wrote Angela a letter, and she wrote you back. You read me the letter.
And then that show closed, and Sweeney Todd came in, and I remember going in and being able to sit in the back during tech and rehearsal, and I didn't know what it was, and then I worked there for the run of Sweeney Todd through Angela, and then when what's her name came in,
Dorothy Loudon came in.
Dorothy Loudon, and I saw the show every night. So I saw Sweeney Todd every night.
I remember seeing Angela and Len's last performance together. It was like magic.
It was incredible. It ran hours and hours long. It was great. You know my story. I was sort of a ward of the state. I lived in an orphanage in a facility, a state-run facility, and then ran away. And my grandparents had an apartment in Bensonhurst, and they had moved to Florida, and my mother was living in that apartment, and she had moved to California, to San Diego, and I took over the apartment. I guess I was, at that time, maybe 15 or 16. It was before I met you. And then
I remember when your mother moved, she was there, and then she moved while this whole thing, because I remember her being in the apartment, and then she moved to San Diego.
I first had lived in, because I first lived in Regal Park, in that halfway house. And then I left there and went back to that. She was going to San Diego, and I said, well, I'm going to take the apartment. Okay. So I went from the halfway house into that apartment. Wow. That apartment was $90 a month. $90 a month. And we used to take the N train to Sea Beach Line at the time, all the way out to 18th Avenue.
It took forever to get out.
Forever! 3 o'clock in the morning, we were so drunk.
I know, 3 o'clock, the club's closed. In New York is 4 o'clock in the morning.
Eddie and I, there were a couple of bars that were our digs. And one of them, it was called Ninth Circle. It was on
which is a famous bar. Yeah, the Ninth Circle, yeah.
And so we would go to Ninth Circle all night, or Gables, which was a disco.
Gables.
And then we would go to Tiffany's Coffee Shop in Sheridan Square. And
broke my heart when I had breakfast at Tiffany's. We used to love that. But it broke my heart when they closed that. I found out they closed Tiffany's.
Bank of America now.
The Riviera Cafe across the street.
The Riv. And then you would have cheeseburgers, and I would have blueberry muffins. So that was every.
Oh my God, you remember that?
Honestly, these when I look back at my life, these are the memories I cherish the most. Those years, you and I growing up in New York together, influencing who we are and what we were going to become, and that masterclass of life that we got. It was and everything was a discussion and an analysis, and
laughing,
laughing.
drama. A lot of drama. The tiniest thing was drama. Remember that? Everything was drama.
Everything was drama, and it was communal. We had friends.
Yeah.
There were never less than 3 or 4 people on our floor. This is a tiny little apartment.
Tiny little apartment.
Like 400 square foot apartment.
Yeah, tiny little kitchen, tiny little living room, tiny little bedroom.
Roach infested. We had to get a gecko lizard to eat the roaches.
And we had, which lived a day, and then we found it like months later dead under the TV.
And then, well, the cat ate it.
The cat ate it.
The cat ate it. And then, but it's so interesting because when you tell people these stories, they're like, oh my God, it was so glorious.
It was. Glorious. I would trade it for anything. I mean, at the time, I didn't realize how wonderful it was. But, because, part of you working a lot, but it was wonderful.
I went to NYU, and there were a bunch of actors in my class. I auditioned for we were living on Thompson Street, and I would see all the NYU students, and I was like, I want to go there. And I decided to audition, and I had no money. So I wrote myself 2 monologues, and I got in, not because of my acting ability, because I was a horrible actor, but I was a good writer. And I got a scholarship to NYU and Circle in the Square. I went to Circle in the Square, and Donna Murphy was in my class, and Andy McCarthy, and who actually went to do the original Merrily. He was in the original Merrily, and a bunch of people. But it was a interesting time. I didn't stay the whole time because I didn't really want to be an actor, and knew that wasn't for me. And I didn't, we were working with Nikos Sakharopoulos and Michael Kahn and Terry Hayden and these, and all I wanted to do was shtick.
Yeah.
I just wanted to do shtick comedy. You were the legit actor. I mean, you were like, you and your group you were really legit. I was Musica. I was Dudley Moore. That's who I wanted to be.
You were always writing. I remember you wrote that radio.
And I wanted to be I really just knew that I wanted to give birth to the characters, not bring them to life. And I got to a place where I realized that was my calling. New York really went into a depression. This was the mid '80s.
You were very unhappy. You were very frustrated in New York toward the end.
I couldn't get a job to save my life. I was doing, all kinds of crazy minimum wage jobs. It was very hard to survive. New York went into a deep depression. The AIDS crisis, everybody around us was passing away. It was a horrible time, and I needed to get out. I just needed to get out. So my mom was living in San Diego, and my sister were living in San Diego, and I said, let me go to California for 6 months, just to clear my head. And I did. And I lived very short time in San Diego, but there was nothing to do between yawns there. I was like, I can't do this. And then I decided to go up to LA and see what that was about. And I had one friend here, and came up and got an apartment, and just ended up bumming around LA for a while, and always say, I'm going back to New York. And then just started to write and just kept writing and trying to submit and trying to meet people. And it was really hard. And I had basically just about given up. And I met my friend Howard Sussman, who's still the costume supervisor on Dancing with the Stars, and has had a career for many, many years as one of the top costume supervisors in Hollywood. Had a boyfriend that was in La Cage aux Folles in LA, and I met him, and we got an apartment together. And I was sort of, he was at the beach and he ran into a friend, and they called me and they would say, we're looking for somebody that has a joint. Do you know do you have a joint? And I said, yeah, I have a joint. Come on over. And this guy came over. His name was Danny Margosis, and he was working at CBS as an assistant. And at that time, if you worked at a network, they had right of first refusal for anything you wrote. So if you wrote something, you had to at least show it to them so they could pass on it, because they owned it. That was part of and we wrote a pilot together. We decided we want, and somebody there read it and said, this is good, and gave it to an agent at ICM at the time. And literally we got our first agent and bummed around for about 6 months or so trying to get a job, and then got our first job. And it was on, I had at that point enrolled in beauty school. I was going to be a hairdresser.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because I was like, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And then we booked Designing Women, and that's where it started.
Wow.
So, and I was like, wanted to give up, and I just said, I can't. And that's how it started. And that led to, we did Designing Women for a few years, and then went from there onto a show called Living Single. And I got to work, Designing Women, I got to work under David Steinberg, who was the director, comedian, comic, who taught me. It was a really weird time on the show, but it was, he taught me so much. And then I went on a show called Living Single, which became,
that show, yeah.
It was Queen Latifah and Kim Fields and Kim Coles and Eric Alexander. It was a groundbreaking show, one of Fox's big first comedies, African-American comedies, that really was groundbreaking. And I got to work under Yvette Lee Bowser, who was an incredible writer, showrunner, and taught me everything. And normally you work your way up from staff writer to, on your way up to assistant producer and co-producer and assistant showrunner, and it takes years and years. And I wrote a pilot while I was on that show, and it got on the air. And I got my first show on the air very young and very early. That was a show called High Society, which was an American version of Absolutely Fabulous.
Oh, yes.
And then after that, I got a production deal at Warner Brothers, and I got very lucky at a time in television where there were 5 networks. There wasn't all this. And I got really lucky, and I learned my craft. I worked really hard, and I learned under people like Bob Boyette and incredible people who taught me, who took me under their wing and taught me.
High Society was Gene Smart. Gene Smart,
Mary McDonnell, and Faith Prince. And you know my Faith Prince story, but I won't tell it. I love Faith. She's an amazing talent. And I got lucky, and I learned my craft and worked my way up. Just worked my way, kept going, and got very lucky. And then sitcoms died. Survivor, the TV show Survivor, came on. It was the first reality show, big reality show that hit. And after that, and suddenly you couldn't sell a half-hour comedy. Could not sell a half-hour comedy. All people wanted was reality shows. They were inexpensive. They got incredible ratings. Nobody wanted scripted anymore. So my career was kind of over, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I had a dear friend who's now president of Sony Television, whose name was Jason Claudefelter. I met him when he was a waiter in LA, and we became great friends. And he worked his way up, and he was working for Aaron Spelling at the time, and Aaron Spelling's company. And I hadn't worked in about 2 or 3 years. I couldn't get a job. I felt like my career was over. Many sitcom writers at that time lost their careers, were done. And I ran into him in New York, because he was there for upfronts, which is where you go at the for television season to find out if your show was getting picked up and put on the air or not. And I ran into him, and he said, "How are you?" I didn't see him well. I said, "I basically am done." And he said, "You're not done. Let me help you." And he said, "Let's sell a show." And he was selling 1 hour dramas. And I said, "I don't know how to do that. I write comedies." He said, "You let me handle that." And he came up with an idea that I wrote as a dramedy, which is a 1 hour with comedy. And we sold it. And he put me back on the map. I got a second chance, and he put me back on the map. And I started to work again. And then I was working with the infamous and legendary theater and TV producer Bob Boyette, 10 Tony Awards, and at that earlier was Miller Boyette, and then made the deal with the National to bring all these shows over from London, and is an incredible theater producer who I met early, and he would call me in. He had a show he was producing, which was Dame Edna, Back with a Vengeance on Broadway.
Yes.
And he said, come in, we opened in San Francisco, and I think it needs an angle. And would you come in and work with Barry Humphries? And he remembered how all I used to talk about was theater. And he gave me my first shot. And I did that show. And then he gave me a show called, an infamous musical called Lone Star Love, which is that crazy Randy Quaid, Evie Quaid story, which everybody knows.
Oh my God, that was like in the gossip column.
Oh, that's a whole other conversation. It was like new level insanity. It was insane. I had to get a restraining order out against them.
Oh my God,
it's crazy. But he gave me that show, and then he said that I was in LA, and he said, "There's a show I want you to come and see at the Mark Taper and it was 13, Jason Robert Brown, 13, written by Dan Ellish at the time, and he said, I want to bring it to New York, but it needs some work, and I said, would you sit and talk to Jason Robert Brown? And I said, yeah, fine. And I did, and I ended up rewriting and doing 13, and that got me back into the Broadway world, and that's how I made transition back to theater.
Well, and I did 13 at Epac, and Rob came to see it and talked to the kids who loved you.
It was great. It was such a full circle moment that you had done that show for. We had lost touch over the years. Not lost touch, but our lives went in very different directions. And we didn't speak for years and years. We thought about each other often, but it just, day turns to day turns to day. And
then you reached out because you got sick. You had that stomach thing, and you reached out to me.
And then we started all. We had our second one, and so that's sort of a long story of how. But I will say this: it's hopefully somewhat a tale of talent, but it's more a tale of fortitude. It's just that it's not giving up. It's just knowing you can't do anything else, and knowing that what you do might not be what everybody wants, but that doesn't mean there isn't a place for you. And just believing in that. And the one thing about you and I is we never cared what anybody thought.
No, we
you more than me, but you never cared what anybody thought. You don't understand this man. We literally put on full-scale productions in our tiny little apartment on Thompson Street. But you taught me so much. You were always so much you were always so much smarter and more eloquent than I was. You were always a raconteur like I had never met. And I learned, I've told you this before.
We were kids from Queens.
What's that?
We were kids from Queens.
We were kids from Queens. But you had immersed yourself in theater, and you read everything and knew everything, and I didn't. I learned a lot from being with you in our conversations, and it was you just were a sponge.
So even though you took the journey into theater, and kids, listen to the story because never give up. That's the moral of today's show. You went through television. You always loved the theater. It was because we grew up in New York. We went to the theater. The theater was on. You always wanted to get back to that. Was your first love. Am I correct?
That's absolutely
correct. And another thing, little known fact, this kid was obsessed with Patti LuPone. Obsessed with Patti LuPone. We saw Evita how many times? And then
we got the concept album.
First, we got the concept album, and then after Evita, you were obsessed with her. And then we went to all her concerts. She did a concert downtown. We went to all her concerts.
At Lamouche.
Anybody.
She did her nightclub.
Lamouche. Remember Lamouche?
I do. I snuck in a cassette tape recorder and recorded it.
Oh my God, I remember that. Yes, she did a show at Lamouche.
We were all obsessed with her at the time.
great New York discotheque where you go into this great elevator. They're all downtown. They're
No,
all like
it was
over.
Midtown. It was Midtown.
It was in Lamouche Midtown, and you
Yeah.
go into this great elevator, and you go up to this like really incredible club, and like
great.
the big stars would play there. It was very popular.
And she would come after her performances in Evita.
Yeah, I remember Lamouche. We spent hours in Lamouche.
I was obsessed with Patty. Yes.
Yeah,
and
you were.
Later on, and then we became friends.
I know.
I just saw her a few weeks ago. It's sort of crazy with her because her life is so full and she knows so many people, and she is exactly what you think she is. Truly is. And you know what? More than anything, what she is she's a gypsy. She is a company actor. That's what she is. She knows her place in the history of American musical theater, and she knows she is a star. But she is an actor's actor, and as long as you bring your A game, she will respect you. But she also knows so many people, and you never know that she's even going to remember you or know you or whatever it is. And over the years, I became friendly with her through a series of events, and it's so funny because just a couple of months, 2 months ago, I was at Bar Central in New York, and I was with a group of friends of mine. And she came in and sat at the booth next to us, and I'm always like, will she even remember me? I mean, and we're sitting there, and she's by herself waiting for people, and I just hear Robert, in that voice, and I'm like, hey, and she's like, come here, sit down, and I'm sitting there. I had this moment, and she was doing in previews for company at the time, and she was talking about this and that. We were talking, and I had one of those moments. I was like, Patti LuPone, first of all my friends are like, Patti LuPone, say your name. And we're sitting there, and you have to tell yourself, we're peers. We're both in this business. We do the same thing. I shouldn't feel intimidated. And but you also understand that you're with, it's Patti LuPone, and she's a legend. And it's crazy. She's absolutely, everything you see is what you get with her.
She's not a phony. Everything you see is who she is.
Not a phony, and she's truly an artist, and she will talk to you for hours about craft. She's yeah.
Wow.
She's wonderful. She's great. She's great. I'm dying to. I have never worked with her, but boy, I would give anything.
I was in New York recently to see Tootsie close because I had to see it. I went to see Tootsie. Did I see closing performance or?
No, you came before closing. Yeah.
Yeah, before close. And I went to see it. It was a funny show. Your book was hysterical.
Thank you.
Hysterical. It was a really wonderful, funny show.
It was really truly one of the most rewarding experiences of my career, of my life. You know, sometimes I've worked on shows that were not fun, that, you know, that just are work. And it's really about you, and you know this because, you know, a fish always smells worse from the head down, and whoever's in charge is really going to mandate what the mood is and what that is.
Definitely.
And working with Scott Ellis and Yazbek and Andrew Grody and Dennis Jones and this incredible team of consummate artists, every day was laughter. Every day was fun. This ensemble of actors, it was really like the Carol Burnett show. Santino Fontana and Andy Grodelucian and John Bellman and Lily Cooper and Sarah Stiles and Julie Halston, legendary Julie Halston. And this incredible ensemble of actors that every night brought it. And it's an incredible feeling.
It was an incredible cast.
To be sitting in that theater it's a big theater. It's almost 1,600 seats or so. And to be sitting in that theater and hear these waves of laughter, this tsunami of laughter because of what those actors are doing and the love that crept over those footlights. It was an incredible thing. Normally when after a show opens, you're done and you move on to your next project. I kept going back to the theater to see the show because I just had to be in that room. Yeah. I didn't go to see my work. I went to see what the audience and what they were doing because they were just, you know, Ed.
Oh, yeah.
You know what it's like.
When I went to see it with you, it was funny. I was sitting there, I was just enjoying it, but you were still working in your head. You were like, I said, Robert, it's great. No, it didn't really come off the way it should. You were still working.
You always do. When you do a show, let me ask you, when you direct a show,
Yeah.
opening night happens, gets great reviews, people love it. Aren't you still, no, that could have been different. That could have done that. I could have done that. You're never happy.
So, yeah. Well, no.
Or you're happy but not satisfied.
I'm happy or not happy. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's like, oh, that could have gone better. But some shows, you know, I've been doing this for, you know, since forget it, you know. But some shows you just like, oh, that went great. Couldn't go any better.
Do you get shows that you decide you're going to put on and then you start working on it and you say, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what this is. Or do you know before you, do you say, we're not going to do that show because I wouldn't know how? Or do you do it and then figure it out?
I usually pick shows that I have a feeling towards, so that doesn't happen, you know. I mean, when I was a freelance director around here, that would happen sometimes. Like I was hired to do Cinderella at the Fulton, and I was like, okay, I'm doing Cinderella. What, you know, what the heck am I gonna do? And I, you know, and we did a really cool production that was 1950s, based on Vogue magazine of 19. It was really this like off the wall production, really cool. So, and I learned that. I learned when I started freelance directing, the most important thing I learned is that never turn down work because you don't feel it, because you always make it yours. No matter what it is, you can always find something in there that you feel is important and make it yours. And so when I pick shows, I usually have a feeling about the shows that I pick. Some shows like, yeah, I pick shows like Annie too. Some shows I just want to forget.
Well, there's something to find in that, which is Annie one.
No, I didn't direct it. Everybody tried, but everything's been in a theme now. Annie too. But there's some shows that just don't work out because, as you know as well as I do, and this goes with what you were saying, it's like having a dinner party. If you have the wrong cast together and they don't mesh, show don't work. And it becomes horrible. I mean, it's like a good dinner party, a cast, if they connect, if the cast is having a good time, the show is wonderful. And I find that there's really do. The cast was like,
the audience feels it. They do.
Yeah, the audience feels it.
Is there a show that you have not done that you just want to do so badly? Have you done all the show? You know, is there something still in that queue that you're like, I got to do that show?
Not that comes to my head. Not that comes.
Something's afoot?
No. I can honestly say I have no desire to do something. So.
You know, yeah, okay. Theater's tough, you know. I got lucky in that I straddle between theater and television because theater doesn't, it's hard. You're betting on yourself. You don't make a lot of money unless you have a hit. You don't make a lot of money up front. You work for years and years on a show for nothing, for passion. And then if you're lucky, the show does okay, well enough to be able to tour and license. And then that's when you sort of are investing in your future. But it's a big gamble. It's a big gamble. And it's tough. That's why, you know, you have to, like, I probably have like 4 or 5 musicals in a row lined up now over a series of, for the next few years, because you have to in order to survive. So I look at what's going on now in the world and these actors, theaters closed, and how these actors are surviving. Yeah. And it really is, it's an industry where you have to be willing to ride that wave of incredible disappointment and incredible euphoria. And material things can't be important because there's a good chance you will work but never have any. But there's such a sense of community. Different than LA. LA is a community, but it's not a tight-knit community. New York, when I'm in New York and I'm in that world, there's such truly a sense of solidarity and community in a way, not that it's not competitive, of course it is, but But it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me. I'm constantly blown away by the heart and the passion in that industry that is more about it's more about talent than it is money. But we sure did cut our teeth in those days.
Yeah, we really did.
And learned our craft. I mean, could you, I shouldn't make it as a question, not a statement, but could you be doing what you're doing and achieving all that you're achieving now, artistically especially, if you hadn't had that experience?
No, because it made me who I was.
It made you who you
And
were.
it kind of like, because as I said, New York was a part, and one of the reasons I left New York when I did was because it was such a party. And yes, it was the AIDS crisis, it was encroaching, people were dying, but still it was so easy to get distracted in New York.
Yeah.
It was like my
still
job,
is.
like theater just went further and further away and I didn't care about it. I was working at the club, I was dancing, I was like doing everything. And finally I said, I've got to get off this merry-go-round. So I started to, sing the theme from Valley of the Dolls and took the Amtrak out here.
Oh, Anne. You took Dolls for one night and then decided no.
I want to be Anne, but I'm really.
There was one point in our history in New York. I was working at Cinema 1 and 2 on 2nd Avenue.
Got me a job there.
3rd Avenue. Yeah, but then you were working around the corner at, what was that movie theater?
I was managing the D.W. Griffith movie theater.
I was at Cinema 1 and 2.
Cinema 1 and 2. I started working at Cinema 1 and 2. You left, you got me that job. And then you went to Swenson's ice cream parlor.
Other way around, wasn't it?
No, because
Oh,
I remember I used to work at this, which is right next to the tram that would go to Roosevelt. I used to close the movie theater after the last show, and then walk over to Swenson's, and we would go home together. Right?
That's right.
Give me an ice cream, and then we'd go home together. Yeah.
Yeah. But we were working at these two movie theaters, literally around the corner from each other.
Yeah.
And maybe make a stop or two at the Townhouse, which is still there.
It was called the Region East back then.
Oh, that's right. It was.
Yeah.
You have a better memory than I do.
What do you do? What's up next for you? Well,
theater-wise, there is something I can't talk about, but it'll become public in the next month or two, and everybody will know what it is. I have a show coming. We were supposed to open in DC in September, and obviously that's not going to happen now. But it will come to. We'll either find another out of town, or it'll come to New York. And it's It's a musical we did years ago. We took it out of town to Dallas, and it just wasn't right. It needed to work, and it went through a series of changes. And we've got a whole new team. It's a musical I'm writing with Brandy Clark and Shane McAnally. I don't know if you ever watch the Songland on NBC, the reality show, but Shane McAnally is a judge on that show, and he's one of the most successful songwriter producers in Nashville. And Brandy Clark is an incredibly talented, very famous country singer, Americana country singer, who has a new album out called Your Life is a Record, which is, I recommend everybody get. And it's a show we're writing called Shocked. And it is a country music folktale that is truly one of the funniest things I've ever worked on. It is gut-wrenching, laugh-out-loud, hysterical, with some of the most amazing music, directed by Jack O'Brien, legendary Jack O'Brien. And I'm very, very excited about that. There are 2 or 3 other projects, which I won't say. 2 of them are movies that you and I love that I can't say because the deals haven't closed, but I'm very excited about that. And another that I just might be doing with Brandy Clark and Shane McAnally again, based on a Shirley MacLaine movie that I love. That's all I'm going to say. So there's like 3 or 4 things in the hopper with that. TV-wise, Netflix is making a movie of 13. Yeah. And so that was supposed to, Jason and I are working on that, and Tamara Davis is directing, who's incredible. That was supposed to start shooting in July in Toronto, and that's been pushed now.
Are they using the score? Because the score is quite wonderful.
Yeah, we use a lot of the score. There'll be some new songs, but a lot of the score and some of the book. I've rewritten some of it, but some of it just works really well. So doing that, I have a pilot at Fox, which is I don't know if it's going to go or not because all this shut down. I'll find out after, but it's a really wonderful. It's sort of Designing Women meets Blindside. It's a true story about based on the life of a football player. I'll tell you what football is after. A football player named Malcolm Mitchell, who is an amazing guy. He played for Georgia Bulldogs and then New England Patriots, and he didn't know how to read. He became really successful, and nobody had taught him how to read, and he became really insecure about that, and taught himself how to read, and became an advocate for children and literacy and all that. And he was in a Barnes and Noble in Athens, Georgia, and this 26-year-old, really good-looking athlete met this like 50-year-old woman in a Barnes and Noble and joined her book club of all like 40 and 50-year-old women. This young African-American, really famous athlete, and these 50-year-old Southern women. And it's a story about their relationship. It's a really lovely
fabulous. Oh my God, that sounds fabulous.
And we're in the process. I'm working with Jeffrey Seller and Flody Suarez on a TV show version of Diary of a Mad Playwright, the James Kirkwood book, about his life on the road with Mary Martin and Carol Channing in the show Legends. So we're turning that into a series. We'll see what happens with that. So I've got some fun, really fun stuff that
sounds like some fun stuff. And how you dealing with this whole crazy, insane time we're living in for right now?
It is crazy, isn't it? It's sad. You make the best of it, and you know, for me, I'm lucky because I have what I can do here at home, and I would anyway. Mm-hmm. My schedule, other than I should be in New York. My schedule hasn't really changed. I write, but it's hard. It's challenging. It's challenging to watch the news and feel that kind of frustration and sadness, and have that sort of in the zeitgeist and hanging over your head all the time, wanting to scream
news
and
junkie
yell.
Before this, like I had MSNBC on all the time, and I half an hour in the morning, catch up, half an hour at night. I can't. It's the same information over and over again. That's all anybody's talking about.
It's the same information delivered often by people who shouldn't be delivering it and don't know what they're talking about. And
didn't it break your heart now, as New Yorkers, the stuff we've seen from the city, from New York? It just broke my heart. Do you know that hospital that was in the news a lot, Elmhurst General? That was our hospital.
I know. I remember.
Cool. Yeah.
You know, it's so funny. I just had this conversation the other day because as I said, I'm in LA. Was in New York and I left right before all this happened and came back to LA. And I know this sounds crazy, but I have this tremendous guilt that I feel like I've abandoned the city in its hour of need. And even though I'd be stuck in a 1-bedroom apartment I feel so distant from my motherland. I can't explain it other way, but I feel like my heart is there. My heart. So many of my friends, most of my great friends are there. I have some here, and I feel like I talk to them all the time on FaceTime, and you know what the kids do, whatever that is. But I really feel separated from the city, and I long to be there again. It's a physical pain.
Yeah.
Do you go a lot to the city?
Not as a lot, because I'm working a lot. I don't go as much as I would like to. Yeah.
I will say this. When I'm in the city, I'll call Ed or I'll text him and say, I'm in the city. I got tickets to this. Come. I can't. I'm doing a show. No, all right. I got tickets to this. Come. I can't. I'm in rehearsal. Come on. I got house seats that I would love, but I'm
But you've given me so many wonderful tickets to so many wonderful shows that gotta love you. I saw Hedwig. You gave me 2 tickets for Neil Patrick Harris and Hedwig. I probably wouldn't have seen it if you didn't get me those tickets. It was for my birthday. It was wonderful. Wonderful.
That was a great production. One of my dearest friends, Kevin Cahoon, was in the original. He was John Cameron Mitchell.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, remember, I went to dinner with him last time we were together. I was like, I know you from somewhere. Yes. And Yeah, that's
Or
cool.
anytime, every time and anytime. You know, if I'm in the city and I'm going to a show and you're like, I'm in the city, I'm like, we are there.
Yeah.
We are there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing
I
like it.
used it.
This is like theater, and I think it will come back. I do believe that it will be a learning curve. I think it won't be the same for a while, but I think it will be vibrant. I think so much great new work will come from this. I think there'll be a lot of people with a lot of things to say. I think maybe this is just, I hope more than I think, maybe this is just my sort of naive optimism, but I do believe that there will again be a hunger for community and for theater and for people to be in a room with other people laughing and crying and feeling and sharing that experience.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. I think it might take a long time. There might be a new normal before we get back to our old normal.
Yeah.
But you will never, ever get rid of that instinct people have of the communion of theater, of everybody together sharing.
It's primitive.
And it'll always be with us.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's ever going to go away. And I think when we get through this, however long it takes, people are gonna flock to those communal experiences. I really believe that. But I did know that I had to cut some stuff out of the season or delay some stuff. So what I did was I took the heavy stuff out of the season, like Hedda Gabler, but that's one. You asked me what I want to direct, Hedda Gabler. I wanted to direct Hedda Gabler my whole life. So I was supposed to direct Hedda Gabler, but I said, you know what? Save that. Because people are gonna want to see life-affirming stuff. They're just gonna want to come back and laugh. They're gonna not.
I agree that I'm lucky. People are gonna want comedies, and that's what I do. So I think
they're gonna want to laugh or have life-affirming.
Do you know what your first show will be coming back?
Well, we're gonna do The Curious Incident of the Dog at Night because we closed it right. We were going to open it and we had to close. I mean, literally, we were going to open the set. Go into the theater now, the set's still standing, the props still there. It's like Chernobyl. Everything is still standing there, and it's like really weird. But we have to open with it because it's been paid for, it's ready to go. So we'll have to open with The Curious Incident Dog at Night, and then I'm going to push Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder into the second.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Which is supposed to be running now. Yeah. So, because I think people are going to want to laugh, and we'll see.
These are good shows. You should go see these shows.
And then we're going to we still have Matilda on the docket and Boys in the Band. So I'm hoping, but if, whatever we can't do this year, we're going to push for next year. Sondheim concert, did you watch?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay.
Not only did I watch, but what?
Audra, Merrill, and Kristen.
I know.
They heaven.
Didn't see that coming.
No, didn't see that coming. That was wonderful.
And Patty's sitting at home going, I'm good with this. I'm okay with this.
She was actually really good. She sung Anyone Can Whistle. Did you do that?
Spectacular. But
oh my God, people are going to be like, oh God, these guys. You saw it, remember, merrily, we went together, saw it. It's horrible. Remember the first preview, like early? We were like, what are we watching? We didn't even know what we were watching.
We went back 3 times.
And Alan Gomberg was like, you've got to see it again. They fixed it. You've got to see it again. I said, Alan was so bad. You've got to see it. And we went back and loved it. And saw it. 3-4 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Overture is like great. Bum, 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 bum,
bum. Listen, I even though they, they had their technical difficulties. It's a new world. I can't imagine how they did what they did. But it was an incredible night. It was a testament and a tribute to our community.
Mm-hmm.
The talent was spectacular. Everybody there was no pretension about it. Nobody tried too hard or perform. It was just
seeing them in their houses with their quarantine hair. It was
seeing how
except man buns. Get rid of the man buns, guys. I'd rather see.
I know. And just seeing how Bernadette Peters actually lives in a yard sale was just it was truly, there was no pretension. It was literally, it was almost as though we were not watching actors. We were watching citizens. We were watching Friends.
Yeah, that's
performing for us. It was so personal. It was truly personal. It was really it was a night that I think is important. Was important, and we'll remember that for a long time. It was.
Yeah. And you're right. It wasn't like we were watching stars. There were a couple. We won't go into that. When they were acting up a storm, I was like, all right, just calm down. But most of them were just so normal. What?
Yeah. I was like, calm down.
Just sing the song, please.
It's Sondheim. You don't have to try. It's there.
Exactly.
It's all there for you. It's all there for you.
Say the words.
Say the words. But yeah.
But it was like very informal, and you felt they were friends. And another thing, hearing all, like, I was weaned on Sondheim, but I haven't really sat down and listened to tons of Sondheim. Hearing all those songs back to back to back, you're like, oh my God.
And we've seen almost all those shows.
All those songs, like incredible. All those songs. I'm like, wow, like I really kind of was a genius, wasn't he? Robert, thank you so much.
I love you madly. I am so thrilled for you and your success.
Going to New York with you and your husband was fabulous last time. And thank you. You're such a gracious host. And Alexandra, you treated her like family. My operations manager and us, we went together. And she knows how to handle herself, but it was just a lovely.
Anytime and every time, you are your family, you know.
Thank you.
And congratulations on everything and the work you do there, and just how you elevate and celebrate this art form is an amazing thing. Truly amazing thing. I think people. There's this somewhat elitist belief that theater only exists that true theater only exists in 10 square blocks of New York. And the truth of it is, some of the best, greatest, most inspiring theater happens all across this country and outside the city. And you guys, that's what you guys are doing. It's pretty impressive.
Thank you. Well, I think we're going to end. We think we've been through it all. And we will bring this to a close. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
I loved it. Anytime. Do you need me to do a plea for money or something?
I was thinking, thank God we're not in quarantine back in that little apartment in New York. It would be murder-suicide.
We would be dead.